to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Sitka. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mr. Knox?
Here.
Mr. Mosier?
Here.
Mr. Christensen?
Here.
Ms. Himshoot? Here. Mr. Miller?
Here.
And Mayor Eisenbeis and Ms. Duncan are absent this evening.
Any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? Seeing none. Before we get to ceremonial matters, I just wanted to acknowledge the passing and actually the celebration of the great life of former Mayor John Dabsovich. John was a long-term serving mayor here in Sitka, serving 6 years at the mayor's position, serving a time and then taking some time off and coming back and serving in the position again. He was first elected in 1971, and actually the year that Sitka became a unified city and borough. So kind of a big time for our city assembly. Mayor Dabsovich also was a businessman and a community leader, somebody who was very well known for being a very reasoned and thoughtful man, not only in his public service but also in his private life. I remember my dad telling stories of his service and just how he respected Mayor Dabsovich. I vaguely remember him in my youth, though I wasn't paying attention all that much to local politics and community leadership. But just wanted to say thank you to Mayor Dabsovich, that your service over the many years to Sitka, not only as mayor but as a citizen here, greatly respected, and our condolences to the family. So next up we have ceremonial matters. We have some service awards to present to the Climate Action Task Force members, as that task force is kind of winding up things here. We have some certificates. I'll come around and call anybody up that's here in the audience. I'd like to say thank you to everybody who has served on the Climate Action Task Force up until this point, and are very grateful for your service. So if you wouldn't mind coming up, see Elizabeth Bagley is here. Catherine Riley or Katie Riley. See Kent. I'd like to say thanks to Ken. Elizabeth Norman. Molly Greer. Darby Osborne. And Caitlin Woolsey. Thank you to all of you for the service, the time, and the efforts that you put in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Special reports. Do we have any government to government? Municipal boards, commissions, committees, municipal departments, School District. Oh, yes. Amy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor and Assembly members. Amy Ainsley, Planning and Community Development Director. I wanted to provide just a really short report to you tonight that the Planning Department will be issuing a community survey on elements of the short-term tourism plan that the city executed this summer. We have a joint work session between the Planning Commission and the Assembly scheduled for October 27th, and this will be really valuable information for us to gather from the community to hear about what went well, what maybe didn't go as well, what things should we keep doing next summer, and what things should we do differently. This survey will be published on Thursday, September 15th, and will be open until October 15th. And those results will be presented to you at the joint work session. So you'll probably be hearing more from me and some other information that will be made publicly available to try and get the word out. But just wanted to preview to you and to the community that this survey will be open, and this is a really, really valuable way for us to hear from the community about what we should be doing for next summer. So again, visit cityofsitka.com to access the survey starting on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite up the Climate Action Task Force for their final report.
Thanks so much, Assembly Member Knox. I'm Elizabeth Bagley, and I had the privilege of chairing the Climate Action Task Force. And we just want to give you kind of an overview of where we started, where we are now, and where things in terms of climate action are moving forward. So as a reminder, we first met in February of 2021, so just sort of a year and a half ago. And where we started was really reviewing and updating the 2010 Climate Action Plan. So there had been a Climate Action Plan in place. We reviewed it to see where there were still some opportunities that we could capitalize on. We also worked with connecting with Alaska-based municipal climate groups. There are a couple of statewide groups around, and we've become, especially the co-chair, Katie Riley, really active in that group to really leverage the great work that's already happening statewide in order to position Sitka well within the state. And finally, in terms of where we started, we had a work session with all of you in May of 2021, and we're really grateful of the things that came out of that work session. A big win was developing priorities with you all. There's a lot of things under the banner of sustainability that we could work on, and that work session really helped us prioritize what we should work on and how to prioritize that. And the other thing that came out of that was the liaison, so much gratitude to Assemblymember Mosier and Assemblymember Himshoot for being our liaisons and being that incredible bridge between what's happening at the Assembly level and what was happening at the task force level. So just want to really share our gratitude for both of you. So we started with those priorities, and then we dove into one priority in particular that I'll talk about is the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We were lucky enough to have Dr. Molly Greer working with us on that. She was able to update the greenhouse gas emissions inventory with 2021 data. So we were able to see where there are some opportunities to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions within the city and borough of Sitka, specifically within the municipal buildings and fleet. Some of the recommendations that came out of that work was a vehicle fleet transition schedule. So as we are transitioning vehicles, how might we move into more electric or hybrid vehicles? Working towards getting the remaining city buildings electrified if they still are on any gas, and pursuing the installation of highly efficient heating systems like heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. So that was one of our priorities. Another priority that Katie's going to talk about is sustainable tourism.
Yeah, so just to circle back on the sustainable tourism, and then also we'll be talking about EV and city infrastructure. With sustainable tourism, we approached this through working with what the city was already working on, which was the short-term tourism plan at the time, and we submitted climate-focused feedback on that plan. And then also did research into some of the opportunities that were existing at the time regarding dock electrification, that's cruise ship dock electrification, and with a lot of commitments coming out from the cruise industry about exploring green corridors and how they can also achieve carbon neutrality. There is a lot of opportunity going into the future about how we can benefit from that by electrifying tourism infrastructure infrastructure that we have here in Sitka. And then finally, one of the really important things I think we did was provide a forum for community members to discuss their impacts and concerns. We've all heard of the impacts of the diesel buses, and I know that that's a large concern amongst Sitkans, as was voiced at many of the Climate Action Task Force meetings, so we were happy to collect those concerns. The third priority that we worked on was electric vehicles. This is a huge area for growth and hopefully will be a focus component of the Sustainability Commission. So we did a lot of research into and determined some funding opportunities for purchasing electric vehicle charging infrastructure. There was funding for that came through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and so we worked with the electric department to kind of assess, there's a request for information out, how can they make sure to respond to that so that the city is well poised to cash in on some of those electric vehicle charging infrastructure opportunities. And then of course are constantly reaching out and monitoring opportunities like whether it be locations or the type of policies that we need to have in place as a city to really adopt that kind of infrastructure. It's a very complex topic of which I am constantly learning more, so we were really happy to lean on the network of other Alaska-based entities that have engaged in this in their communities and installed those infrastructure. Regarding city infrastructure, that was the second component of the decarbonization resolution. So that was a large part of that was really identifying, working with assembly members to identify goals for when the city wanted to decarbonize by, and pursuing, a plan to do that basically. And so we collaborated with staff and assembly on that decarbonization resolution, and we're happy to offer our support there. Recommended a few grants for the electric department to pursue, which we then learned that they were in the process of pursuing already, which was fantastic from the USDA to create some more generation capacity and also research some innovative ways to expand those benefits of decarbonization to our community, such as through on-bill financing. So all of these things are obviously, not completed. Like, these are ongoing policies and funding opportunities that the Assembly is going to need to continue to assess, and that there is even more funding for available through the Inflation Reduction Act. So we're really excited about going forward and setting up the Sustainability Commission to take on some of that research and outreach to voice Sitka to be a leader in this year.
So that's where we've been. Where we're going is thanks to you all. We have a sustainability coordinator now at the City of Sitka, which is pretty amazing. So that person will be able to look through the lens of sustainability across lots of important work that's happening at the city level. It's a little harder for a task force or a commission to be able to understand the inner workings in the same way that someone who works in that space can find those opportunity spaces. So that's one big win, the sustainability coordinator. Another big win is what you all are voting on later tonight, the Sustainability Commission. So thank you for recognizing the importance of continuing this work and moving this into a more long-term commission. I just want to really give a few thank yous before we sign off. One big thank you is that this task force was made up of primarily people who have never been civically engaged before, which is pretty incredible, right? This was the first time that lots of us stepped up and stepped in to work on city matters, and boy, have we learned a lot, right? We learned so much, and a lot of that learning was because of the patience of the city staff, the patience of the assembly members, and we learned which levers we can pull and how hard and in which ways and who we want to bring to the table. So we just want to express our gratitude to all of you, to the task force members as well, for meandering with us as we were figuring out different ways to make change happen in Sitka. We know that municipal work is only one way to make change. There are lots of other great groups in Sitka who are working in other ways, and we're just really grateful for the opportunity to work at the municipal level. Some specific thank yous again to Assemblymember Mosier and Assemblymember Himshoot for being our liaisons and really helping to guide us with a number of the tasks that we worked on. A lot of gratitude to Jessica Earnshaw at the city for being our city liaison and just all of the incredibly heavy lifting that she did for us. Gratitude to Sarah Sarah Peterson for supporting us and the work that we've been doing. Thank you to John Leach, our administrator, for helping us navigate the space, as well as Scott Elder and Corey Christensen and the rest of the city staff for really being so patient and kind to all of us and for the collaboration. And finally, I just want to thank the community members who volunteered to serve on the task force. We know that people have a lot of other things they could be doing, and we are grateful for folks stepping up and serving on the task force. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Okay, Michael, you have an update on, and Mike, update on the Sitka Terrace Airport Terminal Improvement Project?
Good evening. I'll try and get the share screen going here. One thing I learned tonight is when you share screen on this program, you can't see your notes, so I'm going to try and do 2 computers at one time tonight in my presentation. First. Tonight we're going to give you an update on the Sitka Airport project. This has been a long time in coming project. By the end of the presentation tonight, I hope to get you up to speed on a little bit on the project history going backwards, and then looking forward at our most current revised design renderings and compare those to where we came from last time. I presented early in 21 on this project. So just a little bit of project history dating all the way back to 2005 with the airport master plan. It really does date even further back than that. That's as far back as I'm doing for a key milestone looking forward. From there, the use of the airport has continued to get more congested from about every type of user, especially when it comes to the fish box and fishing industry that's putting flows through that airport and the challenges that come with that in our hold room. Capacity, heating and ventilation has slowed and became overwhelmed, and so on and so forth. And I'll go through some of those details further in the slides, but just wanted to highlight that really the precipitous to this project getting momentum was through TSA coming forward with a grant to improve their behind the scenes baggage security area, and they saw that as woefully undersized and came forward with a grant. Then off of that in 2018 and 19, we moved to put forward the PFC funding and reactivated that. And that's a per passenger charge to each passenger that disembarks from Sitka, that we get a revenue stream. And from that, the city and borough of Sitka implemented a revenue bond that revenue stream pays that revenue bond. So that leverages the passenger facility charge for $4.25 million. So that, in combined with the TSA project, kind of got the core of the building moving forward. We knew we had a remodel project coming together here, but we still needed much more funding in order to do some of the other areas of the terminal. We pursued that through FAA and DOT and requested $7 million. That unfortunately did not pass in this year. We just found out a few months back we didn't get that funding on the first round. However, we've really developed a good partnership with DOT since we last spoke, and they are very committed to this project, and they do not see the funding levels that we need as costs are continuing to inflate as we go here. inflation is a big factor on our projects right now. They do not seem concerned about that and really do think they can come forward with the remaining funds we need. It's been a really important development and partnership that's progressed. The other partnership we have grown is to try and get this project shovel ready. So we have implemented a unique contracting method called Construction Manager at Risk, CMAR. In 22 here this year, we brought on Dawson McGraw Construction joint venture to bring them on the team immediately to work on design concepts and try and get this facility as constructible as possible and shovel ready, knowing that that best competes with the federal dollars that are coming down the pipeline. So put all that in place. Want to recognize Mike Smetzer as the project manager has come in on this project, and he has really upped our experience level and engagement to support this project through DOT. He's probably on the phone with them every day, working on making this funding happen. So it's really getting positive momentum right now. Jumping back to the deficiencies, they still stand from the original master plan that we're trying to improve. We're getting much more involved in doing every element of these deficiencies in a better way with the new concepts we're developing. And I think you're probably familiar with most of these. Our hold room is woefully undersized. Behind the scenes that you don't see so much, again, TSA is coming forward for the baggage screening area. That if you ever get a tour of the facility, and I'm very open to doing that if you haven't done so already, to see what it's like for the workers behind the scenes when it's really busy getting the baggage through there. The other areas I'd most highlight would be the baggage claim. Very congested, where you have people coming in to go to ticketing, and then you have people leaving and disembarking and trying to get through the baggage claim. It's just very congested in combination of trying to get all the fish boxes through and check in and so on and so forth. So going forward, just this is where we sit today. The other challenge we have that's ramping up significantly is the amount of planes that want to come to our airport and the timing of them. And another player in this, if you look to the right side of our existing terminal, sits here to the left, is the air cargo, Alaska Airlines air cargo. Well, as you can imagine, with all the online ordering that's going on, this operation is growing significantly, which impacts the two available parking spots to service the airport. So this one in prior years has grown to be used regularly as a passenger location for the planes to come in, even though it's a cargo slot. That is becoming more and more congested. The increased cargo, they're not allowing Delta to use that anymore. Alaska's moved them off, and now they're shifting over to the left side of the terminal, which has some real challenges to it. So growth is good, but challenging with our small airport. So looking forward with the concept, just want to take you on a quick tour from the outside, and also you can see the significant increases going from 2 planes out in front to trying to accommodate 4 planes at one time in the future, and how that would potentially sit in front of the new terminal. The expansion areas, the existing building is the low, flat sloped building here. The extended areas are out towards the jetway here along the frontage, and primarily now with this new concept is to go out the far side of the building with a new almost standalone structure, and that really helps with the constructability and cost, so we can get more for the money doing it in that fashion compared to focusing on an internal remodel in the existing building entirely. Moving around the building to the street side, you can, oops, jumped ahead on me there. You can see the expansion a little bit better here from the left side, next to the nugget, and then on the street side, we're continuing to try and have a full covered canopy and an entrance for the arrivals and a separate exit for the departures. And then again, just showing on the frontage some of the things we could do with the canopy to spruce it up, give it a more modern, inviting look, much like what we did here for the Centennial Hall project remodel. Looking at the plane configuration again with the new terminal, we just want to highlight how it can increase in capacity and how that would work. The first floor building is shown here on the left side. We would be able to have on-ground boarding like Delta does now, and they're positioned right here in this configuration. You'd be able to have 3 on-ground capacity boarding with this concept. And then the second floor would immediately be able to serve the current jetway that we have today. And if the ones on the left side here, that keeps jumping on me, sorry to do the cursor. The left side of the terminal on the new expansion could potentially put jet bridges in and service on the second floor as well, which is an efficient way to do it. It's up to the airlines to fund jet bridges, so it'd be up to them to put them in, and they are specific for their planes that are servicing the airport. And they're over $1 million a piece, so that's really why in our summer configuration, you're seeing the ground boarding being a popular choice for Delta and the increased planes Alaska's doing compared to investing into a jet bridge. Moving forward, I'll just give you a quick inside tour. This is a 3D model. If I was a passenger coming into the facility here, oh, cursor's struggling. You come in here for departures and come right into ticketing, which is positioned very similar to what it is today, shifted a little bit further over to the left, and combined together in a line in a consistent way would be Delta and Alaska. This room here to the left would also be an entrance and can be a staging area for the fish box flow. When they come early to the flights, it's a place for them to meet up and store, and it's also a location for overflow for seating and capacity when you're for anybody waiting to get through the ticketing in general. As you go through ticketing, now in this remodel, you would head to the left and come down through the hallway here past the Nugget restaurant, stays where it is, and this is where you would enter into passenger screening. Come through here, passenger screening, and end up in the lower floor hold room, which would service the ground boarding. And then we would have we're updating the concept a little bit. This just shows regular stairs and elevator. We're looking to fit an escalator into to help people get up to the second floor, and potentially a second elevator as well to make that as connected as possible. So really both hold rooms in an airport that's small, whether you're on the bottom floor or the top floor, technically if they're well connected, you could sit in either one. So you move up to the second floor, go up the escalator, elevator. We have positioned an area for vendor space to provide food and different services, much like you'd see in the Juneau or Ketchikan Airport currently. And then the hold room for future potential jet bridges again up here. To go to the existing jet bridge would be down a corridor, a bridge over to the existing side of the terminal where the baggage makeup is. We put a second story on that, and then down onto the jet bridge. This configuration works much better than a remodel configuration terms of constructability to construct this new building pretty much standalone while you keep the existing airport running. And then as you connect this jet bridge over and open this up, you can just swap it over to the new terminal once it's done while keeping the existing running. That in large part has significantly helped on the cost profile, working the contractor on and thinking through how to do this. Looking backwards to our old concept, just to show you where we left off in the comparisons to the two. So the left side here shows our old remodel configuration, which was pretty focused on the existing terminal expanding out towards the runway. In that concept, we were at about 28,000 square feet. We've now increased that out to 35,000 square feet with the new concept. 7,000 square feet may not sound like a lot, but where you really can see the difference here is the baggage in the new concept. You get this entire area, if you can envision the hold room today and the TSA passenger screening opening up that whole area for the baggage. That's a lot of where your extra 7,000 square feet goes, which is significant when you look at the old model here and how tight the baggage area remained, not much different than it is today. And you also see some gains in the hold room. This hold room is larger, especially on the second floor compared to the old concept. So some great advantages and credits to bringing McGraw on to help on this to make it more constructible and on top of it yield more square footage for the money. Going through, just real quick, the second story, you saw that right enough in the new concept, and you can see how much smaller it is in the old. And schedule and milestones, we're looking at doing this in a two-phased approach, and that aligns with the DOT funding schedule that they're giving us. This just outlines moving as soon as we can in January 23. By the end of the year, we'll have 60% design concept, and we'll get moving on the TSA pieces and the funding that we have in hand at that time, which we hope from DOT might be in the order of magnitude of $12 million for first phase. That's still getting fleshed out, but we might have that in hand by the beginning of next year and be able to move forward with the first phase foundation structure in this new facility and get it enclosed, and then keep moving on a second phase to finish up the remodel portions inside the existing terminal and the finish touches to the baggage makeup area. Oops. Looking at the funding, so far we have secured $9.5 million. We just got the TSA approval for construction funding in. That's $5.29 million. You see third down. Our PFC revenues, like I mentioned before, we had in place for some time now. What that really leverages us for, that provides the match for all these various grant fundings, and it's outlined there what type of match you're looking at. So all the TSA funding's at a 5%, and then the FAA DOT money we're working on right now is just like the Sitka seaplane-based project. It's a 6.25% match program through FAA. We're looking at $23.5 million to complete the project from them, and the match on that is 1.56 million. So total match dollars 1.8 million, and that will leverage out to maximize our PFCs, which has also been used to get this project shovel ready. So when we add the required match and with what we're spending on design, it aligns pretty well with PFC funding. So we get what we need from FAA DOT. We're sitting pretty good. That's a really big chunk, and it's a new era, I think, that we can be, it's a special moment in time when we can be looking for that type of funding from DOTFA and the terminal. And I can't understate their support right now, being as high as it is. Looking forward, we'll continue to look for feedback on this concept. We've already received really positive feedback, multiple meetings with the airlines on that side, very supportive, and met with all the leaseholders inside the terminal, received some good things to tweak a little bit, and but mainly very supportive of the concept moving forward. Again, we're targeting to get started here at the end of this year. We'll have the design phase 1 wrapped up this winter, and then continue to pursue the funding. Our goal is, I think we're succeeding in it, we don't want to be the ones holding it up. We are shovel ready, we are ready to move as soon as the funding comes available. That's our unknown right now.
Mr. Mayor, or do you mind if I?
Go ahead, Kevin.
I actually watched this presentation at last CETA meeting, and you said something at that meeting that I don't think I heard you say here. The cost for the new design versus the old one is relatively the same, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I just thought people would like to know that.
Yep, but we get a lot more square footage with the new concept, for the same dollar. Any other questions?
One question that I have with it, we're looking at a pretty significant increase in square footage for what will be, in the end, handling our seasonal capacity issue. Is there an ability built into this so that outside of on our shoulders and in the winter months when we don't have this capacity need to be able to close off parts of the building or not have it utilized so that there's less wear and tear on it, and also need for heating and other things like that?
Very good question. We'd have to noodle through that to answer that fully. I mean, off the top, I can see that bottom floor hold room not be needed in the off season, but how do you not heat it? I mean, you're still walking through that area to get up to the second floor, so I think that's a tough one to decrease heating load and things like that, but reducing janitorial by having areas blocked off and stuff like that. You can look at it. It's a good question.
Rebecca, you had a question?
Yes, thanks. Sorry, I had to find the mute. I have 4 questions. Do you want me to ask all 4 and mute again?
Sure. Whatever's easiest for you.
Okay. My first question is, when we first talked about this, I envisioned this thing having the atrium in Seattle. I thought we'd have these big windows looking out at Mount Edgecombe and at the ramp. And so I suppose windows cost more, but is there any way, we just had that visit from Roger Brooks talking about how to make Sitka more beautiful, and if we're gonna do it, could we add windows? That's one question. And then I know you addressed jet bridges being an expense that the airlines undertake, and I might have missed it, but can this be retrofitted to add jet bridges if an airline chooses to? And then where will commuter airlines go? We're not currently using the counters inside, but if we add small airlines, is it their problem to find space, or is there a place that could be adapted for people to use our terminal for other smaller airlines? And then the last question is, I don't know that anything apart from the canopy in the front of the airport building, but I can envision a day with our parking issues that we might, that the state might choose to require rental cars to shuttle off-site like in other airports. If that happened, is there anything we need to be thinking about now on the design of the terminal that would allow us to accommodate shuttle buses to off-site rental cars? That's it, 4 questions.
Okay. Yeah, on the first question. If you can see the screen, I'm just showing the rendering a little bit more on the water side, the view side that you were talking about. You can see on the hold room, we still have quite a bit of windows. They aren't, you know, the floor to ceiling glass that you'll see in Seattle, but the weather that we have here and the beating that this building's gonna take and the amount of extra heat it takes to heat that, I'm not sure that you would yield the benefit that you would see in the Seattle airport where that's open 24/7. You have this massive people just really hanging out for hours at a time, eating in that large glass space. If you're thinking of the food court area, for example. Here, this is a short sit in the hold room and move on, and you'll still have as much or more glass space as you see in this rendering top to bottom in the hold room than the Nugget restaurant currently has, and you're going to have the same view shed, so I think it's still going to be pretty impressive from the inside, pretty similar to Juneau or Ketchikan's window space in the hold rooms. So that's where we sit and why, and it was deemed an improvement over the old concept to reduce the glassing a little bit to help with our heating costs and maintenance costs. Secondly, just looking at the rental car and the parking lot and that side of the terminal, we are in negotiations with DOT to see what we end up inheriting in the end in our management repertoire. Right now, as it stands, we just manage the terminal. If we do take on the parking lot, I think there's a lot of opportunity to make it better, and I think you're right on. Something we've been talking about for years is relocating the rental car staging off-site so it doesn't take up so much space and we can open up some more long-term parking, and I'd really like to see that happen. But I still see a day use area where they would park their cars that are needed for the day and hopefully stay away from the need for a shuttle. So they'd still be able to walk right out the terminal and get in their car and go, but they don't need to keep their entire fleet out there, was the model we have been discussing and working on. If there were to be the need for a shuttle, I think that's a tough one for the amount of flow you have to justify that, but I think you would need to incorporate that into the parking lot itself, that they would pull through on that middle curve that's there now for taxis, and that would be the spot to cater to them. I think in the terminal we have a very traditional rental car counter and office space like you'd see in most any airport, and that's what we're supporting them in the actual terminal. In terms of smaller airplane users, this concept accommodates to ground boarding very well, so that would be in the lower hold room that they would operate off of. I think, though, practically speaking, that really depends on the bigger airlines' use. They tend to push out those smaller users, and in the structure, that's just inherently the way it works through the FAA rules and processes that they're going to have primary use, the bigger users. So we feel like the terminal's there to provide for that. How that will actually land, I can't speak to the operations of the runway side and how the ultimate leases will shake out. There's no small user interested right now, so the big airlines are going to be locking up those lease areas, at least for the foreseeable future, by what I'm seeing out in front of the terminal. And they'll be getting those through DOT, those lease positions, the way it's looking to be structured in terms of the plane parking. Is that, maybe, if I might?
Yeah,
And then, yes,
my fourth question was about being able to add jet bridges?
Sure, yes, absolutely. The upper floor, and I probably did a poor job of trying to show that. It's what I was trying to show in this depiction, that to the right-hand side, this second story would be able to have jet bridges in the future, and then you'd operate off the upper floor hold room. When they operate off the ground floor without jet bridges, it'd be on the bottom floor hold room, and that would be set up how you see it in the left-hand screen drawing. So there's capability, and that's where the connectivity between the lower hold room and the upper hold room has to be set up really well, that you can feel comfortable sitting in either or, so we maximize capacity. If everything ends up going off jet bridges on the second floor, we still want to be able to use the bottom floor capacity. Folks want to wait down there before they get on. And really encourage people to go through the passenger screening and not wait like they do now. We want it to be a very comfortable space, plenty of room with vendor and food and everything in there. So
Thank you.
Any further questions from you, Zim? Thank you, gentlemen.
all right, thank you.
And that brings us to persons to be heard. Any public participation on an item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes per individual? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Good afternoon or evening. My name is Richard Wien. I'd like to welcome everybody to Sitka, where all of our goods and services are highly dependent on fossil fuels. Everything has an economic underpinning, and it is very important that we take these things into consideration when we do make our planning. I'm sure people know that today the market meaning the Dow Jones, took an enormous fall. The reason it took a fall was because of very hot inflation data, which was not to be expected. If you look at what's called the headline CPI, that was elevated, and also the core CPI was elevated. Because we have an election coming up, the gasoline prices have been down approximately 10%, but they're still at an all-time high, up 25% year to date. But it'll try to be made to look pretty. One of the important things that you have to consider is when you deal with these things, how is this going to affect Sitka? And it concerns me because Sitka is very economically sensitive. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, the second largest appliance manufacturer announced earnings collapse and inventory buildup as consumer sales collapse. The important thing that I get from that, well, here's a quiz. Who is the second largest manufacturer of appliances? Where that concerns me is that the notion of disposable income is coming to the fore in how people have the ability to spend money. And tourism is a luxury item. And so when all of these plans are being made, we really need to consider overall economics as things proceed. All this sounds very good, but I find a certain interesting hypocrisy. Well, not hypocrisy, but a yin and yang. On the one hand, I see the good work of the Climate Action Task Force. I've read their stuff. I think they're trying very hard. And then on the other hand, I see a jetway with 4 jets talking about all of this enormous growth that's going to become, and I keep thinking carbon footprint, and then I drive down the road and see a Betamax, and then I see the streets closed off, and then as I walk in the building, the buses are idling. And so I find this is a very interesting juxtaposition that we are putting the city in. And I find that we may be in a problem if we don't think about it.
Thank you. Any other persons to be heard tonight? Okay, moving on to consent agenda, please.
Move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, approve the August 18th and 23rd Assembly meeting minutes.
Second. Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Assembly? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the minutes, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Timshoot,
Yes,
and Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 on item A.
Thank you. There's no board, commission, or committee appointments tonight, so we'll move on to unfinished business. Item B.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-16S on second and final reading, amending Title II Administration of the Sitka General Code by adding Chapter 2.15 Sustainability Commission.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
My name is Richard Weem. I think the Sustainability Commission is a good idea. I think it's very valuable to have that type of input. As part of the documentation for the Sustainability Commission, it says study and make recommendations to the Assembly on ways to plan for and mitigate the impacts of climate change on the city and reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. As I stated in the persons to be heard, there's a certain dynamic that's being created here. And the truth of the matter is, as I review it myself, my opinion, unless you cap growth in a meaningful way, the Sustainability Commission will not be able to really mitigate any of the emissions of greenhouse gases. It'll just be constantly pushed forward. I understand the dream of electric vehicles, etc., but I think that that is way out into the future. And I think I wish the Sustainability Commission good luck. And but unless you cap things, I think that the deck is stacked. So thank you.
Any other public comment? Assembly deliberation?
I'll just say thanks to everyone involved to draft this, including Ms. Timshoot, Ms. Bagley, and Ms. Riley. And Mr. Leach also helped us with some work on this. I'm really excited about this. I think it's a very good thing. It's a first step. As Ms. Bagley said during the report on the Climate Action Task Force, all those people who were volunteering were new to civic duty, and I'm looking forward to having a good crew of people interested in continuing on. I think it's a really good start, and I'm really encouraged. Thank you.
Tori?
Yeah, I want to applaud the sustainability task force, but I think it's appropriate to have this be an ongoing thing because this is a moving target. There's always going to be issues, and I think that I know it's my hope that if we, as we move towards the goals of sustainability and carbon neutral, it'll actually save us money, and if we do it right. And there was an interesting article in the New York Times today saying that over the next 20 years, as we move to renewables, we'll save trillions and trillions of dollars worldwide. So I applaud the people who are willing to step up and work with us on this, and hopefully, we'll look forward to years of slowly pushing the goal closer to the goal line.
Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-16 16S on second and final reading. Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Ms. Himshoot?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And the motion passes 5-0 on second and final reading. For those individuals that are interested in serving on this commission, the clerk's office will begin advertising tomorrow. We're looking to put applications forward on the October 11th agenda, and so folks are asked to submit applications on Monday, October 3rd at noon for consideration. So if you're interested in serving on the commission, contact our office.
Great. I was just going to ask. It's nice to see that it's moving right along and not don't delay in getting those applications, and looking forward to seeing that body of people come forward. Item C, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-20 on second and final reading. Reading, updating Title 19, building and construction of the Sitka General Code by adding a new chapter and modifying and amending the majority of all other chapters within this title.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Did we want to have a staff report on this first, or just move right into public comment?
Or you can move right into public comment.
Public comment for anything on the motion? Please come forward. No public comment, and assembly deliberation. No questions for staff? Was pretty straightforward. Okay, no deliberation. Sarah, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-20 on second and final reading, Mr. Christensen?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Himshoot?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
And Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 on item C.
Okay, seeing as we're approaching the top of the hour, the next item, I think we have quite a few people who would like to maybe speak to this. Do we want to take a 5-minute break and then come back and address item D? Please. Okay, 5 minutes and we'll be back to address item D.
Zoning of the Sitka General Code by updating Chapter 22.08 definitions and Chapter 22.24 special use permits, short-term rentals. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any public comment to this motion? Mr. Brady?
Guess I'll start the party. So Keith Brady, I own Bear Enough Keller Williams Realty Alaska Group, so I help people buy and sell homes. I'm also a property manager of 60 plus units. I would encourage you to vote no on this one for your final reading and ask for more input on this. I think there's different ways to go about it, especially maybe disincentivizing those from outside buying our properties here to turn them into short-term rentals. One idea is to increase our property taxes, but give exemptions to those who live here, who are residents of Sitka. There's also the 180 days, which I think puts a lot of onerous on the owners of the properties. I have several right now who would love to do short-term rentals, but with 180, they can't do that. They're here in the summer, they fish, and then their house is going to sit empty if the 180 days is part of the code. And so I would just ask that you vote no, but come back to this later or find another way to, I guess, disincentivize the short-term rentals. We do have a housing crisis. Trust me, I hear it. I have a lot of people on my list looking for rentals, looking to buy, but I don't think this is the right way to go about doing it. There's a lot of land for sale right now, even through my brokerage, and no one's buying because the cost of materials is too high. It wouldn't make sense to buy and build anything with the current cost of materials. So, I just encourage you to vote no, and those are basically my reasons why right now. And I would love to be a part of the process to maybe revisit this and try to figure out a better way. So, thank you.
Thank you. The public comment?
My name is Richard Wien. I too would like to encourage you to vote no on this. A number of reasons. I think there are some structural problems with it. For example, I do not think that B&B should not be allowed to transfer their abilities if they sell. The other aspect is that the primary residence requirement is very austere, even though I know it may be modeled after the permanent fund. I don't believe there's any proof that outside interests are coming in and picking up housing stock for short-term rentals. Certainly at this moment, nothing has been presented. The other aspect is I also, if you are going to pass it, then I think you need to eliminate the grandfathering of those people who have short-term rentals, because there's a major difference in this ordinance, because the new people who apply will be at what's called the B&B standard, which is to include property internal and external inspections. And so I think if you're going to have actual inspective in an inspective type of threshold, then I think everybody should have it. And because those people who are grandfathered, this is actually a cash deal, because they're actually going to be making money if they're not under the old rules. So I think it would be, if you're going to do something, which I don't think you should, you need to add that there is no grandfathering, that everybody needs to reapply and come up to the state standards. So I think it would be appropriate to vote no, again, because there's no proof that this will increase housing stock. And as mentioned by Mr. Brady, you know, there are people, because of the primary residence, they're just going to leave it, vacant. And you know, there's nothing the matter with having people utilize your home if that's what you want to do. So please vote no. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tori O'Connell-Curran, and I did submit written comments, as did my husband that I'd refer you to, but I would encourage you to vote yes on this. I appreciate how much public process there's been. I was involved in the work session that a lot of people in this community went to, and this was one of the things that almost everybody agreed on. I don't think it's the solution to everything, but it is a solution to some of the problem. And I don't think we really have a lot of time to wait. Last meeting I gave you the Pew report and other statistics to follow up on, but also somehow it gets lost. Like the idea is you can only rent out your house on a nightly basis or a short-term basis, or you can't rent it out at all in this situation. And of course you can. If you're going to be fishing for 3 months or going to be in Telluride for 6 months or whatever, you can rent your house out by month or 3 months or 4 months. So it doesn't have to say empty. You can facilitate your mortgage payment or your college savings plan. And remember, we're talking about residential neighborhoods. And I, for one, think that it's important to keep the integrity of our residential neighborhoods mostly residential and available for residents to rent or to own. So I think this is a small bit of this, while giving homeowners some choice in how they choose to use their property. So I encourage you to support it, and I appreciate all the work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment?
Good evening, my name is Ann Polno. My name is Ann Polno. Good evening. I'm going to read my statement. Thank you for allowing me to testify. I'm testifying in opposition to this restricting short-term resident ordinance as a whole. As a good and reliable renter in Sitka for 23 years, I never had a problem finding a place and was able to stay in lovely homes for years at a time. What did happen to me was a landlord decided to rent for a double to traveling nurses, and a landlord who sold to a person that already owns properties in Sitka. This prompted me to take the plunge at a horrible time, the recent spring, into home ownership. Luckily, I had been planning and saving for this for about my 23 years. Sorry, I was at the Seahawks game. And I had the means. In this regard, as a former renter, I am supportive of the language in the ordinance noting that the short-term rental in a residential area needs to be the primary residence. I also think you can make the permit restricted to one serving the same purpose without the need for policing. What I'm adamantly opposed to in this ordinance is a 180-day restriction to rent, and the city telling me I must live in my home for 180 days. This is a governmental overreach and may cause a hardship in an effort for me to pay my mortgage. If I find myself having a poor work year, I may need to rent my place, my investment, for 181 days. I do not want to rent it long-term, as I have things in my place and I have nowhere to put them, and I don't want someone to completely take over my home. A short-term rental would be most appropriate in my situation without a mother-in-law suite. I understand the issue of determining primary residence. Taking the model from the state's PFD is flawed in that you do not have to be a homeowner to prove residency. And for this purpose, when you own a home and are paying a mortgage as opposed to receiving a dividend check, it's not an equivalent use of proving residency. You could, like the insurance companies require, the insurance company requires to prove residency through utility bills, taxes, mortgage documents. How do you prove seniors are residents to get their senior tax exemption? The code notes that you are to provide 2 forms of ID to show Alaska residency, and that's it. Are they required to stay in Sitka as their primary residence for 180 days? Is there a punishment of putting a lien on their home if they leave for 181 days? I did not notice this in the senior tax code. This ordinance is not fair between locals because those that already have short-term rentals, some of them units, are grandfathered. This is not Steamboat Springs, it's Ketchum or Whistler. We are not a luxury home.
Fairness to everybody else.
I'll submit my comments in writing.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the board?
Hi, good evening. My name is Wendy Alderson. Thanks for all the work you've done on this. I know it's been a long process. Town hall meetings, surveys, attempted moratorium, first reading. It's been going on for a while. So, and I've been involved. You've heard from me a lot. When I first started thinking about this, I was completely against short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods. It was a planning commission discussion that changed my mind. One of the planning commissioners said, I know an older lady who owns a home, she needs to be gone 3 or 4 months a year to spend time with her mother, and being able to short-term rent her place for that amount of time allows her the income to be able to do that. At that point, that changed my mind. I think that a person being able to rent up to 6 months out of the year their primary residence, I love that this ordinance provides for that. That gives people a possibility to rent for up to 6 months out of the year. It also gives them the possibility to have a mother-in-law apartment 365 days out of the year in their primary residence. One of the interesting things that I've heard is that we have a high vacancy rate in Sitka. I don't know if you fill out the rental survey, if any of you have rentals. I do. And interestingly enough, when you fill out that residential rental survey,
it specifies check if vacant the week of March 11th. So you have to have a vacant rental the week of March 11th in order to check vacant. To me, I've always thought that that indicates that, you know, it's a shoulder season, short-term rentals are usually empty the week of early spring. And if you haven't filled your place seasonally and you're turning it over and waiting for short-term rentals, it's going to indicate that you have a vacant rental, which I've always thought indicates that it's a false number. That's my opinion. And also, I guess that just quickly, I took a look at zoning tonight before I came, and there are at least 15 different commercial 1 and commercial 2 areas, zoning areas that house residences. There are 4 waterfront areas that house residences, not to mention General Island. If you want to own more than one short-term rental and have a commercial endeavor, I think that there's plenty of room to do so commercially. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Welcome.
Hi. My name is Teal West. I want to make it very clear tonight that I am here because there is obviously a problem in our community, and after reading the ordinance, what I see is that the problem with housing in our community is not going to be solved with this ordinance being passed tonight. There's a loophole that I found in the ordinance. So what I am reading, and I could be wrong, and you can discuss it after, but if you ask short-term rental owners to live in their homes for 180 days, and the primary residence in Sitka that is needed to live here affordably is a 1-bedroom apartment, which is what the workforce in Sitka needs in our community. They don't need $3,000 a month homes that they rent long-term. They need 1-bedroom apartments. If this short-term ordinance is incentivizing community members to take their apartments and turn them into short-term rentals, because they will qualify under this permitting process much easier than someone like me who would want another property when I already own a home that I'm not going to move out of. So my point is, if you incentivize that, there is a huge supply and demand going on in Sitka. You cannot get a rental in our community if you want to come here 2 weeks before May 15th and September 15th. It doesn't exist for visitors. So with that being said, if these short-term rentals start going away because of the permitting process, and you are giving homeowners more opportunity to charge more per night, the visitors are going to pay $350 a night to stay in Sitka. It's that desirable. So why is this ordinance, I don't understand why this ordinance is presenting itself as a way to solve a long-term housing crisis or an affordable housing crisis in our community, when we are actually doing the opposite by enforcing a 180-day resident stipulation in the permitting process. I also want to touch really quickly, because I'm running out of time, that if you live in a neighborhood with short-term rentals, you do not know that there's a short-term renter living next door to you unless you actually go over next door and you talk to them. Short-term homeowners, 9 times out of 10, the home is well kept up. It looks great. The people are here on vacation. They want to be good visitors. That's not even true. So that's my point.
Any further public comment?
Good evening, everyone.
one, I'd like to again thank the Assembly for taking this issue on, because I know that many folks here and across the country have strong opinions where personal property is involved. But I think that this ordinance does a good job of balancing private property rights, zoning regulations, and the city's responsibility to make policy that supports a livable Sitka for current and future generations. I've made my thoughts pretty clear on this issue, so I'll spare you all, but a couple of points that I'd like to make in light of the new data that's been released is that the State of Alaska Department of Labor released a economic trends report in September that shows that 3.5% of Sitka's housing units are short-term rentals. That's the second highest percentage in the entire state. And we are limited in a way that much of the state is not, but at least here in Southeast Alaska is, by our topography and our geography, and the fact that we do not have the ability to expand in the way that other communities might. So we, I think, have recognized throughout the process that this ordinance is not an overall housing solution, and I think it's incredibly important that we continue to chip away and address this issue. And if anything, I'm really grateful for the conversation and the attention that this ordinance has spurred towards the broader housing issues in our community. But I do think that it is one thing that we can do to prevent more homes from transitioning from long-term rentals and owner occupancy to short-term rentals. Some folks mentioned that they'd like to hear some examples, and to bring those up, there was a permit that was granted earlier this year to a large house on Eliason Loop where the owners already occupy a long-term apartment here in town. So that is already happening. I do not think that this regulation will lead to an increase in something that is already happening, and I'm hopeful that it will have the opposite effect. For those who may be hesitant to take action until there's better data, my question is, how bad does a trend have to get before you're willing to take action? This new report indicates that there are the short-term rentals that are being permitted now in the second quarter of 2022 are significantly higher than before the pandemic, when there was already a significant trend in place that obviously took a dip in 2020 with the circumstances that we were facing then. So I'll just leave you with a personal anecdote, is that someone from another community in Southeast Alaska called me recently because they heard what we were doing on short-term rentals in Sitka. Their whole street has gone dark during the winter, and almost everything has been converted to a short-term rental. These are good homes, walking distance of the school, used to be lively neighborhood. This person is a self-identified libertarian who was identifying an unregulated market as the problem. And if I have a self-identified libertarian calling me for solutions, that really demonstrates a lot, I think, of the challenges that we're facing here in Southeast Alaska. So thank you for your efforts here and your time.
Any further public comment?
Maureen O'Hinlin. I just came tonight to support this motion, and I hope you all vote yes.
Anybody else? Okay, back to the Assembly.
Okay. Thank you. Just want to thank everyone who's helped make this happen. And Truth, Ms. Wiley, and Ms. Alderson did help me get this on the radar. And about a year and a half ago, and I started paying attention. I think I expressed this at one of the several meetings we've had before, that when I went down to my daughter's wedding in Tennessee, I saw how you have whole blocks of housing units that were all short-term rentals. And it just helped me see how this thing is going, and I started paying a lot more attention. We've discussed this quite a bit, and I understand that some people are feeling, surprised by that, and I apologize if people think that. However, we have been pretty open about this. We tried, Mr. Knox and I tried a temporary moratorium that would have given us a little time to basically come up with this and maybe some other solutions. That failed. That was 2 meetings that it was advertised, it was in the paper, it was all talked about. And then after that failed, we decided to have a town hall meeting. And that was also well advertised across several venues. So, and that town hall was very successful. I felt like people really had input, and it wasn't people who were just supportive of this type of regulation. It was people of all opinions. And as someone said, yeah, the biggest thing that people were zeroed in on, the most important, was the residency requirement. I've heard a lot of people who said that they're grateful for this and in support of this. I've also heard some people who are not in support of this. This is a very tricky issue. It is something that big and small towns across the nation are grappling with. People are trying to figure this out. I believe that this is a very light-handed, level-headed compromise to try to help alleviate this. Point of clarification, so yes, it is a residency requirement, but say if you had a duplex, you could rent out that other half. I think some people might not realize that. So as far as the residential side of this, the arguments against I've heard is that government overreach, not just by the person who spoke this here, but by a couple other people. And I disagree. I believe the government, local and large, has every right to regulate zoning in its districts. It's a very fundamental part of their duty. As Ms. Alderson pointed out, there's several commercial zones where people are free to purchase property there and create short-term rental units all that they want, and they don't need a permit for that. Residential short-term permits are actually an exception to an otherwise zoning of a neighborhood that is supposed to be residential. So if someone who is having a short-term rental in the residential and they want another one in residential, that's more of a commercial enterprise. That's becoming a commercial enterprise. Then that becomes not just wanting to help supplement help you with your mortgage, but that is, you want to actually start making money on that. And that's a good thing, but you can do it in a commercial district. And I also disagree that people won't know. Yes, there are a lot of people who run short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods that you don't know. It's well kept, but it's not guaranteed. Residential units are designed, or zones are designed for a specific reason. So it is a family-friendly area where people can live and grow. Finally, I might have some other points after some people speak, but we have to start somewhere. And as many mentioned, this is not going to solve every little aspect of it. It's not my intention to just have this pass tonight and then just forget about the rest. I think that, yeah, we do need to do other things. And I'm committed to trying to work with the community and other assembly members to do that, just that. People mentioned opening up land, and that is something I'm very much in favor of, city-owned land. But that takes a lot of time, and it does take resources to develop or put out for bid land that we have. And we do have, some people say a lot of land. We might have a lot of land in theory, but not developable land. So we need to devote the resources to figure out what is developable and come up with a plan to have that subdivided and sold out. And all of that takes time. And the one final thought I would say is, as I agree with whoever said, I think it was Katie, how long do we want to wait to get, and I've said this at other meetings too, if we wait till we have all this 100% concrete data, it's going to be too late, especially a place like Sitka where we don't have other places to live. If housing units are bought up and long-term, whether through purchase or rental, are taken off the market, there's no place for people to go. We are in a housing crisis, and this is the beginning step in trying to help find solutions. And I want to thank everyone who's been involved. And I thank everyone for your comments.
Dave? I think that this is where I don't like being on the assembly. I think this is one of those decisions that we have to make that not everybody's going to like. And I'm going to, whatever way I vote, I'm going to apologize now to the other side, because I can really see both sides of this. I've been in other places in the country where towns have lost all the rental stuff because, people have put in and bought houses that are owned seasonally, or they've gone Airbnb or rental or whatever. And the workers in those communities then travel 40, 50, 60 miles to another town to make it more affordable, so that they can afford to work in this other town. And I think that's a disaster waiting to happen, because we can't do that. We don't have that ability. In fire departments, we would sort of call that mutual. One town's going to help out the other one survive. But what happens even then is the second town fills up, and then the third town has to take over, and prices just keep going up down the line. I'm not sure if there's a great solution. I've read in the last week or so, probably, 20 or 30 letters. Teal, you had a great letter today that you sent to us. Took me forever to read it. It was long. I'll give you that. But it was good. The points in it were great. And I read great points from both sides of the thing. I don't know what the whole solution is, but I do know that I've talked to enough people in town, business owners and everything else, that have said, A, we can't get any help because nobody wants to work, and B, we don't know where to put them if we do get them, because we don't have any housing available. That's a concern to me, especially if we're going to continue on in our tourist industry or our fishing industry. All of those things take housing, and we just don't have that now. I don't know if the problem is short-term rentals or what, but it seems like a lot of this stuff happened during COVID. Where all the workers went, where all the housing went, where everything went, it all seemed to happen in that 2-year period that took away everything that we need to survive. Is there a solution? I don't know. I don't know what that solution is. Just opening up land to build more places, I think Mr. Brady brought it up. We just can't do that. It's too expensive. The land's not, if the land's not expensive enough, just to buy the 2x4 and a piece of plywood to build a lean-to will break most of us. And so we can't even live under the lean-to anymore. This is that decision that I'm sure, whichever way I vote, I'm going to lose, I'll say friendship. Because people feel pretty strong about this. Like I said, probably 20 letters in the last week or so. I would say there's probably a few more on the side of vote yes. But the ones that say vote no are very good. I don't know what the solution is. This is going to be a tough one. Thanks.
Can we go with Rebecca?
Oh, sure.
Come over here.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Hey, sorry I'm not in a great location tonight, you guys, but I had a question and I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Maybe you can just give me a thumbs up if I'm correct rather than calling Amy up to the front. But anything over 30 days is no longer short term, right? That's a long term?
Correct.
Okay, so my thinking is if you want to rent your place more than 180 days, you do a series of 35-day rentals. There's nothing here that says you can't do that. This is a really hard decision. The points that were brought up by people who are in opposition came fairly late in the game. There are some good points being made, and I invite those people to get involved with the Planning Commission, to get involved with the process as ordinances get deliberated and passed through 2 readings, so it takes a month to pass an ordinance. But in the meantime, I continually get stuck on the fact that we are an islanded community, so you can't drive 45 minutes to get housing somewhere else that you can afford or even that you can find housing. We may have to take extraordinary measures to protect our housing stock. The other thing that keeps coming to mind is Craig, for example, for 30 years has had on the books, you have to live on the property to have a bed and breakfast. It's not 180 days, you have to live there, period. It has to be your primary residence. So I think there's a wide range of what's expected and what is required in other communities. I think this is I'm willing to try this out for a while, and so I'm going to support it tonight. That said, our housing market right now doesn't feel very dynamic. It just feels like there's, greater need than can be filled in Sitka, so that doesn't feel dynamic, but I have seen it go up and down. And so, ordinances can be changed, they can be repealed, but for right now, I feel strongly that we need to do everything we can to protect what we have, and so I'm going to vote yes tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Dave brought up some points here that it definitely is two sides to this, but some thoughts that kind of went through my mind is, first of all, nobody is saying that this is going to fix housing costs in Sitka. It's a chip away. It's not this is going to fix everything. And I think that some of the objections to this are more, I think reading something into this that isn't there to a certain extent. In my mind, the short-term rentals, when they started becoming a thing, were people renting out ADUs or mother-in-law apartments. They lived there, but they had an apartment that they could do that. And it's changed to whole houses, and where it actually is taking things really off the market. And I know that the planning commission meetings where I've been there as liaison, we've started to see flat-out investments where people aren't living in houses, aren't even living in town in some cases, where they're just, where they're taking things that were on the long-term market and they're coming off. I know I was against the flat-out moratorium, and I think this is, like Kevin was saying, pretty balanced. The idea behind the 188 days is we had a number of people say that we go fishing during the summer and we want to rent our house while we're out of town. But I think the expectation is that most people renting out will be living on site as well, pretty much year round. Whether they move into the small apartment and rent the big house or vice versa, either way, it allows people to see some revenue from their house. And at the end of the day, we are talking residential, and that really, again, at all those meetings at the Planning Commission, you realize that most of the time somebody came forward for a conditional use permit, or at least a lot of the time, the neighbors were against it. They didn't want all that extra traffic around them. Sometimes I think that they were more worried about it than it was really going to be. And residential areas are supposed to be not commercial. I mean, that's the whole idea behind residential. And there are a lot of properties in town that where the commercial, General Island, waterfront, this doesn't apply to. And finally, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, it's not that hard changing it. But we've had a lot of meetings about this, and I think this is worth giving a try. So, it's not going to fix the problem, but I think it will chip away at it a little bit.
Okay, I don't have a lot other to say that hasn't already been said tonight. I think the thing that I will echo, though, is that what Tor just said and what Rebecca brought up first was that this can be changed. This is, a step forward in protecting our long-term housing stock in residential neighborhoods. And when other solutions are put forward and that we are working ourselves out of this housing crisis, we can make changes. We can pull this back. But right now, I don't have to have the Sitka data, a full-on study to realize, for me to see that we do have an issue here, and that's something that was brought up as great concern from a number of different angles. The survey that was done, the town hall, and in a lot of the conversations that I've had with folks that have really been struggling trying to find places, and then just looking through the planning and zoning commission meetings and seeing how many conditional use permits are being issued. I think the other piece of this for me is that in going forward to the planning commission meeting, they felt like this was also a reasonable step to take at this time. So beyond that, there's other places that have tested this and proven that a residency requirement is something that can be done in this fashion. Being a resident on the property or in the house is appropriate. Where we can't go is making it an Alaska residency requirement or something like that, because we're stepping over legal lines that probably wouldn't withstand a challenge. So, yeah, I thank everybody for your time tonight, for being here, and thanks to the Planning Commission for considering this over several different meetings. I'm hopeful. I know that I won't be on the future assemblies here in the short term, but I'm hopeful that additional work comes forward and that we are able to really address more components of the crisis that we're facing here. Any additional deliberation, Dave?
I just have a question.
Sure.
And I think I asked it last time, but I want to be sure. Existing short-term rentals aren't affected by the 180-day requirement. They're sort of grandfathered in, so they don't need to worry about it. It's only the new people, the new ones, that would need to worry about it.
That's correct. No additional comments, Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-21 on second and final reading, Ms. Hamshoot?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0 on item D.
Okay, thank you. Item E, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-22 on second final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal years 2022 and 2023 reappropriations and supplemental appropriations.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Do I, any public comment, please?
Richard Ween. I certainly understand the need for reappropriations. That's very clear. There's one of those aspects which needs to be continually read into the public record, and that is the $254,000, which is used to pay for the Cerner EHR, which was an ill-considered, costly decision, self-inflicted, and we have to count. And we lose track of all of this money that has gone through these very poor decisions. So just wanted in the record that this is mentioned, it's not forgotten, and this was a 7-figure problem. So, but, and again, we're loaded.
Additional public comment? I think we lost Rebecca. Still going here, right? Any assembly or deliberation? There's none. Sarah?
Okay, on motion to approve ordinance 2022-22 on second and final reading. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 on item F.
Okay, item E. We're on to item F.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-23 on first reading, amending Title 4 Revenue and Finance of the City General Code by amending Chapter 4.12 Property Tax, Section 4.12.025 exemptions.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. We're going to have the Assessing Director, Larry Reeder, come forward and give us a short overview, please.
Good evening, everybody. What this is about is changing the due date for the senior citizen exemption application. City code right now has it as February 15th, and it seems every year we have a few that come in after that, and they say, oh, I thought it was at the end of, or you want to, it was at the end of April or February, that's what they remember. So I felt like to clear up any confusion, we still have plenty of time to do the work we need to do to produce the value notices by March 15th. And hopefully it'll save from confusing people as to when the applications actually due. So, any questions?
Any specific questions?
I just have one. Do you really think that this is going to fix the problem with people coming in late?
No, not completely. But in talking with the folks that do come in, the only avenue they have is to come in front of the assembly. And I tell them about that, that at this point I don't have the authority to okay this application. You need to go in front of the assembly and show good causes to why you didn't. And I don't think any of them actually did do that. Kind of scares them off a little bit. And I think the senior exemption program in Alaska is excellent for our senior citizens, for the folks that need it. And I'd like to see everybody that qualifies and gets that benefit to get it. I think this will help.
Thank you. If we have no further questions, we'll call you back up. Any public comments to the motion? Seeing as none, back to the assembly. Seemed like a logical thing to me to bring it to the end of the month. End of the month is always an easier one to pay on your calendar. Grateful to staff for looking into that, and then glad that it fits within your timeline for your deadlines too. So. Sarah, roll call.
On the motion to approve ordinance 2022-23 on first reading, Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
All resounding yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
The motion passes 4-0 on item F, and that's first reading. And Assemblymember Himshoot needed to sign off, so she won't be joining us for the rest of the evening.
Okay, thank you. All right, item G, please. My motion.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-24 on first reading, updating Title 9 Health and Sanitation of the City General Code by modifying Chapter 9.16 Ambulance Service.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Can I have Fire Chief Craig Warren come forward for a short overview? And then we'll move to public comment.
Good evening. Craig Warren, Fire Chief. Realistically, this is just cleaning up the code several different ways. First of all, the code was written in '73. State of Alaska had had started the process toward an actual ambulance service in '76. So we predate the division of EMS under the Health and Social Services. So the cleanup is designed not to prevent private ambulance services from coming in. Is to make sure that our residents get emergent care from the fire department, even if we're not transporting and billing the patient ourselves. The part two of this is that every time we want to increase the fees for ambulance to follow the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, we have to come before the Assembly. And that changes yearly. It's not big changes, so it's more onerous than it's probably worth. But now we haven't made a change since '09. So part 2 of it is to allow us to build up to what is allowable through Medicare and Medicaid, and hold that billing level for years to come. So if they go up 50 cents, we get to follow. It's not a big change. I've looked up a lot of different data points and concerns that I thought people might have, so I want to touch on those real quick. Approximately $70,000 increase in billing last year, so it's really not a large change unless you add the 65 from the year before and the 60 for the year before. You know, it's kind of getting away from us. So part 2 of this is, and my first question, how many of our residents are going to be directly affected? How many people actually come down to city offices and write the check for the wrong bill? The easy answer is I don't know, because we don't have a breakdown between how many were our residents and how many were non-resident. Currently, we are 38% of our patients are non-resident patients, so this is a decent sized number, but we only had 32 self-payers in fiscal year 22. So it's a fairly small number. The largest increase will be ALS emergent calls, which goes up $70. The routine transports that we do, the majority of the time, is like a $25 increase. So it's not a huge increase, but over 1,260 calls in 22, it makes for a little bit of a difference. So rather than come before you every year, we're hoping to just clean it up and say we get to follow Medicare, Medicaid's pricing. So those are the 2 parts of it.
Thank you. We have further questions on Coupon? If we have further questions, we'll call you right over in the corner. Any public comments on this motion?
This is something, Richard Weem, this is something that needs to be supported. And it's a good way of thinking in that if you have a billing opportunity, then there is nothing the matter with being able to bill to the maximum amount that you are allowed. And what this does is allow the EMS, the ambulance service, to bill CMS at its maximum allowable. And even though at the end of the day, it's not a lot of money, if you compare what they're billing now with what they would have gotten, I think that it is a good way to think. It's a good way to clean up things, and it's a good way to maximize revenue. And I wish it would be thought about when selling land or making leases that we actually deal with the attempt of reasonable maximization. And so I'd like to give a shout out to Craig Warren and Rob Janik for putting together the data that was presented in the packet. And I'll say it's about time, and it's a very, very reasonable thing. And hopefully the thinking in maximizing revenues becomes contagious. On a second note is that it's a very expensive cab ride if that's what you're using the ambulance for. Thank you.
Further public comment? Back to the assembly. Tor?
Yeah. So according to this, I run one ambulance call with an ALS, and I can pay my assembly wages. Anyway, no, it is overdue. It's a fact of life that it costs money to run an ambulance, and the equipment is probably the smallest part of it. All the training, the state has increased the level of training that we have to do pretty dramatically in the last year. I'm still going through all the online videos right now. And the amount of other, we're adding more and more procedures and things that we do, and all of that takes time and money. But the fact of the matter is, what it allows us to have is a really nice ambulance service that when you need it, it's there. I also like the idea that, you know, every time the cruise ship dumps somebody on us, we can recoup it, which is nice. 30% of your calls, I suspect that there's not very many cities outside of, you know, tourist areas that 30% of their calls are not locals, but you know, we need to do this and make it automatic. Pretty much everywhere in the country is just, you're tied lockstep to the Medicare Medicaid rates. So thanks for all the information.
I would just like to ask him a couple of tough questions, but I'm not gonna
Not gonna put him on the spot. All right.
Like what, you didn't do this?
Okay, Sarah, the motion.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-24 on first reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Hipshoot, she is not here, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
and Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
The motion passes 4-0 on first reading on item G.
And you want to take, name the 5 signal. We're going to take 5, be back in 5 minutes for image.
We'll get your water now. They were going to have questions. Second.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a motion and second. Can we have Harbor Master Stan Eliason come forward for a short overview, please? We're going to keep you to the short, Stan.
Good evening, Stan Eliason, Harbor Master.
It's all yours.
Well, no, we had a fire across the harbor here late in May. It did substantial damage. We're estimating that what we're asking for is $250,000 for the replacement of the infrastructure that was damaged to bring it back up to its, I guess, brand new life since the harbor is just only 2 years old. And we plan on, once we get the money appropriated here, we move forward with this project and hopefully have it executed by this time next year at the earliest.
Okay. We can bring you back here if there's any specific comments that will come from the assembly, but first we're going to take
I have a question, not necessarily, because I don't know if it's right now, Ryan, to a certain extent.
Let's do public comment first, and then we'll come back to our deliberation. Any public comments? To
Age before people.
welcome Chief Beatty.
Good evening. I just wanted to add to the testimony here tonight. This is Robert Beatty, Chief of Police. I just wanted to mention one other thing, that the city, this was due to a criminal act, and the city will be seeking restitution from individuals involved once bids are through and estimates are done too.
Richard Ween. I think this is important. Everything in life has some kind of lesson. And this is one of those object lessons. This is a criminal act. It was a fire. It is something that caused damage on an area which we utilize. I invite people to take a look at the packet, which is online, and there's a very nice presentation that was made with graphics and so forth, so you can truly understand what the $250,000 will buy, plus some of the logistical problems in replacing this. It's not as straightforward as you think. Interesting objects here is that, one, there will be restitution sought. That may or may not occur. Item number 2 is that the city doesn't have property insurance. And I presume, or at least I inferred from the packet, that you don't have it is because it's, I guess, pretty expensive. But, you know, I leave that to Mr. Eliason to explain, but I can understand why we don't have it. The things where it becomes the object lesson is, this is a simple thing, it was a stupid thing, but it costs $250,000. And where's the money going to come from? Initially, it's going to come out of, I guess, the harbor fund, but needless to say, those funds have a lot of use, and if it doesn't come from the harbor fund, then somehow it'll come indirectly from the general fund. And this is why concentration on revenue and maximizing revenues are so important, because you don't know when these things will occur. And how many $250,000 oopses do we have to have? We've seen it in the school district with the heat pumps, 600, and it just goes on and on and on about these additions. But yet I don't hear the running total. And I think it's very important that these things need to be paid for, and eventually they come from some service sector within Sitka, and that's why it's incumbent upon the Assembly to concentrate on revenue. Thank you. Bless you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, back to the Assembly. Tori?
Yeah, so, Brian, what are our options? I mean, how realistic is that we'll get any significant amount of money from the families of the perpetrators who did this? I mean, when they set that fire, probably didn't realize they were on camera, but...
What you're referring to is the fact that the perpetrators, alleged perpetrators, were juveniles, and they're in the juvenile justice system right now. The juvenile justice system has been in contact with the city, working with the Harbor Department, the Police Department, and the Legal Department. We're providing all the information for, ultimately, when the disposition of those juvenile cases occurs, that we will get a restitution order from the court. I think what your question is drilling down to is, are we going to get any money from that restitution order? I'm not going to call that a horse race, but you can imagine that if you have 4 juveniles under these circumstances, they don't have a lot of disposable cash to pay the city, in my estimation. So I guess I just did estimate it. And the families are responsible for the juveniles' actions on a very limited basis sometimes, but not for the vast amount of money.
Any questions for Stan? And the illustrations in the packet are, show the extent of the damage that was done. It is pretty significant. It seems like, quite a bit of it is stuff that we don't actually see. And like Stan pointed out, this is a very new facility, and probably, that obviously drives some of the costs too. It's going to take quite a bit to repair all of this. It's very unfortunate, yeah, as it was pointed out, our harbor users or our community is going to share in the burden of repairing this. So it's sad that this has to happen. Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-25 on first reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Moser,
Yes.
and Mr. Miller.
Yes.
The motion passes 4-0, first reading on item H.
Item I, please. I move to approve ordinance 2022-24 on first and final reading, authorize an application to the Edward Burr Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, J, program for pass-through grant with the State of Alaska Department of Public Safety Division of Administrative Services Grants Office. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on item I. Can we have Police Chief Robert Beatty up, please, so give us an overview.
Good evening, Robert Beatty, Police Chief. Just a brief background. Around August 24th, I received a phone call from the last state troopers drug unit informing me of this JAG grant. The unique thing about this JAG grant is that the state troopers have traditionally used the money from this grant to fund their positions. This year they decided that they were going to pass through those funds to a few select police departments. We were one of the ones they thought of, so therefore we got the call. The positive things about this grant are that it's a no obligation grant. There's no new positions created. There's no additional monies or obligations, matching funds that we have to do. Literally, it's offering to pay for one of our police positions to do drug investigator work. So my plans, if you all approve this, is that I'm going to be taking a pre-existing position that we already have, that's already in our budget, and simply reassigning that position to a drug investigator position. The other things that I think are of note for Assembly to consider is that there truly are no obligations. We could decide to pull out at any time. We could decide to get back into it. Let me see if I have missed any of my bullet points. As I think I've already stated, no newly created positions. Basically, this is as good as it gets. We have another agency paying for a position that we already pay for. I would encourage the Assembly to authorize this grant authorization. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We'll call you back up if we have comment or questions. Any public comment on this motion? Seeing none, Assembly?
Straightforward.
I did have one question for you there, Chief. Sorry to let you walk all the way back in the room.
You're obsessed.
Yeah. I think it's great that it doesn't have a lot of strings attached and that we can use it for a current position that we already have and we're not adding positions, although we aren't fully staffed up at this moment in time. Is that correct? We have open positions within the department.
Multi-part question, but yes, correct. There's no strings attached. It's not like a traditional grant you see where you can't supplant current positions. And then we're not fully staffed for police officer positions where we have 16 authorized full-time employee positions for that. We're 2 positions down. Not really extremely bad when it comes to manning and staffing. There are times when we're kind of short on staffing, but we could range. My thoughts and plans for this particular position is that the majority of it is going to be dedicated to drug investigations, and when we need that person to slip back into patrol, that's what they'll be doing. So I'm not going to let it be to the detriment of what I consider our core duties, even though drug investigation and whatnot is high up there, but there's a lot of other things that are handled on a daily basis that I don't want to shortchange our community.
Right. So I guess the second part of my question, it would be around continuity. In doing the drug investigation work for a year, that's going to be great. At the end of the year, is this officer going to be pulled back into standard duty, or will there be avenues in which the drug investigation work can continue? Because we all know that it's not going to get solved in a year. It's an ongoing issue, and we don't have a drug officer or a drug detective at this point that's dedicated to that kind of thing. Everybody kind of does it when they can, but having this position dedicated to that at the end of the year, what kind of continuity would we likely see or not see?
So currently, the way we operate patrol is that everybody's a generalist. In other words, we train them in everything. We currently have 3 officers that have an interest in drug enforcement, and at different times they develop leads, they initiate cases. Oftentimes, a lot of cases that they are generating, you don't hear much of. It's the ones that actually go to full fruition that you hear of. We continue to do drug investigative work. At the end of this year, I can't speak for the troopers' intent if they want to take that money and fund their positions in the future or not. I was led to believe that this may continue, but I don't think there's any guarantees. It's at a year-to-year thing right now, but things have looked pretty bright with the police department for, at least in the police officer positions, for quite a while. I mean, I think we all know how badly off we were at staffing 3 years ago. To be only 2 positions down, I think is pretty good considering the lack of workforce and people wanting to work not only in police positions, but just about every position in the country. But I think we're doing pretty good. I don't see it as a huge detriment, and it certainly could, whatever benefits we reap in a year, I think will be good, and if it continues, great. I think that the efforts that we have after the year, even if funds disappear, is that we can still continue with our investigations, because we also have a different funding source for drugs that we've been using. As everybody knows, we're part of CCAT, and CCAT pays for all drug-related overtime. So we've been able to do it. It's just been on an overtime basis primarily. We do stuff on duty, but we are also able to recover costs through CCAT. So I see it as it'll always continue. But when someone's wanting to give us full-time money for a position like that, I'm certainly going to make every effort I can to capitalize on that and dedicate a full-time position to it too.
Like I said, it's kind of no-brainer. It's nice to have the opportunity, and wish you guys luck in the application process when it comes through. Sarah, roll call, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve resolution 2022-24 on first and final reading, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Moser?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen? The motion passes 4-0 on item I.
And item J, please.
I move to approve resolution 2022-25 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for and execute a grant with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, restoring fish passage through barrier removal, notice of funding opportunity for $1,000,000 $853,390 to support the Wachusett Storm Sewer Rehab Project.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have Michael? Can you give us a quick overview?
Sure, Wachusett Street Culvert's kind of the sister project to the Peterson Street culvert replacement we did just below the high school a year or so ago. Similar to that project, we're under the mission to try and attract as much outside federal funding to what otherwise would normally be a general fund style project. So we're being patient on it. We're going after and overturning every rock we can find to help minimize the impacts to the general fund. And because fish are involved in this stream system, it is attractive, and we're optimistic we can accomplish that in the same way we did Peterson. And so we are finding out we're not getting every grant we're going after, but the opportunities keep coming up. This is a really good one to more or less seal the remaining funding that we need on the project. So much so that we can reduce some of the other grant requests if we're successful on this one. We are at a 95% design level, very close to being able to bid this out looking at November. So if this funding comes through, we will keep pace, otherwise we'll slow up a little bit and try for some more grant opportunities.
Okay, before we move to public comment, as I've stated before, I live just downstream from this project. My driveway and access will be a little bit affected by this. I don't believe I have any conflict of interest. If anybody would like to speak differently to that. Okay. Open the floor to public comment. Dr. Ween.
Richard Ween. Well, removing the barrier will make it easier for you to swim home, but that's another story. Question is that this is a great idea if you can get the money. It's $1.8 million. If it removes the barrier and the fish begin to return, that's wonderful. Question number one is there ever follow-up with fish studies to see if this barrier removal is successful? So that would be one question that I have. And my recurrent theme is keeping track of like matching. This has, I think, a $254,000 match total. And I think that even though it's $1.8 million, for us it means $254,000. And even though in relation to the grant it's one thing, but when you add up all of our matches, it might be significant to our general fund, and we do need to keep running totals of this. So good luck in getting the grant, and do they have fish analysis? And it sounds good. Thank you.
Any additional public comment? December? I had a question. In the memo, it's I thought that the project was going to be going forward in potential start of 2023. Are we bumping this now? Because in the memo it states the bidding is anticipated November 2023, construction 2024. Is that correct?
I believe that's a typo. We're looking at being aligned. I mean, it really depends on the grant funding, but we have the project well positioned to be shovel ready this year in November. So if this funding comes through, we can move right away, but that's that crystal ball of whether or not the funding comes. So if it doesn't, then that gets back to what I'm saying is I would encourage us to be patient and continue to reapply in the next year rounds and some of these same ones and look for others and try and alleviate that burden on the general fund to a certain point. And I would like to emphasize that although this project can be funded through the fish resource, the primary purpose and involvement with the city is this is an important culvert underneath one of our roads, just like Pearson, that is in need of repair, and this is looking forward to leverage, not only improve the habitat while we're after it, but we really need to get this culvert done regardless, and that ownership lands on the general fund, so every dollar we can get in, even though we're matching, is far superior than the general fund covering 100%. And so I think past 23, we will keep inspecting it, but I would think we would be really feeling the pressure to get out there and need to do it much beyond that.
I'm being right there, and I've lived on Peterson Creek now for almost 12 years. That culvert is in pretty rough shape. I've looked into it. It's greatly corroded and degraded. To the comment about whether or not there's more fish, there's a lot more fish coming up from after the Peterson Street improvements there. There's quite a few more, and they're stuck right there at the Wachusett culvert now. We can't.
Yeah, these
really
fish,
get past it.
these fish passage culverts are so well studied through the Pacific Northwest. You just at this point, you know, when you put them in, they do great things from that standpoint. So it's pretty well proven.
A lot of fish in there, and it's hitting my nose these days. Sarah?
Motion to approve resolution 2022-25 on first and final reading. Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0, first and final reading.
Okay, Item K, please.
I move to authorize Friday, November 25th and Saturday, November 26th, the sales tax-free days for 2022, noting the sales tax-free days will not be applicable to any sale of fuel, alcoholic beverages, tobacco products, and marijuana, nor affect any sale which is part of a continuing obligation of the buyer to pay the seller over time.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Can we have Finance Director Haley come up and give us an overview?
So very briefly, analysis of tax returns from last year, and this is just local tax returns. We estimate that there was probably about $500,000 worth of sales that were not taxed on the two tax-free days last year, so that would be about $25,000. You know, that we have a challenge, we have to inform the Remote Sellers Commission that we have these sales tax-free days. However, at this point, we don't believe that most, if any, remote sellers are actually implementing this. And so, you know, the purpose of this was really focused on local sales. So even though we're required to inform the Remote Sellers Commission, we don't believe that it's having much of an impact. However, software systems are constantly getting better. It's getting easier to implement these kind of things. So at some point that could have a bigger impact if we start exempting online sales as well. And we are working to get better tracking on this so we can get you better numbers for next year.
Call you up if there's a question. Any public comment?
Richard Lee. Having a tax-free several days after the holidays, I think, is a wonderful thing. It's kind of like a cruise line hot dog day or something, where it's kind of a thank you, and also allows the promotion of local businesses. I think that is great. Actually, I call it senior for a day, because seniors are exempt every day. So this is, you can get the feel of what happens when you reach the status of venerated elder. A couple of important questions, and that is, it states that you have to notify the Remote Sellers Commission, and I presume that's the AML group. It was not specified. Whether it's I don't think it's the state commission. I think we're doing this through AML auspices. Now my question is, what actually, in actuality, is this remote sellers group doing to inform the entire universe that this is tax-free? And I think that's serious, and though nothing is going to happen to it, it is a legal question, because people on that day, when you vote for this, and I hope you do, people should be allowed not to be taxed. And so my question is what is the legal obligation for the tax commission to transmit this information? And what does it mean when they actually fail to inform? It doesn't sound like a lot, but with the amount of stuff that Sitkans order online, I think it could be quite substantial in relation to into people's, one, saving 6%, and two, actually would change the calculus as to how much the city would be giving up in not remuneration for those taxes. So to me, it's kind of a legal question, and I would like to have it answered if this is the AML group, and has one find answers as to what they actually do to inform the taxation world. Thank you. Especially Amazon.
Any further public comment? Back to the assembly. Tor?
Yeah, I think everybody's come to expect this, and honestly, I think there's really not much choice, so we should do this. I suspect that everybody, if we didn't do it, would be like, what? I thought it was tax-free day, so it's become a tradition, and we should keep it going.
Concur. I have a question for Brian. Is a seller obligated to honor this? The way I kind of read the code, it's just, it authorized a day of tax-free, but if I went into a local or other entity, Amazon, they could say, no, we're still charging the tax, and we will remit it. They're not obligated to offer the tax-free. It's their benefit to offer the tax-free.
I'm thinking about this for the first time. And I would say that if it's a collection and remission obligation, and if we're taking away the collection and remission obligation, then they have no right to collect, and we should not take it from a seller for these 2 days. So, can a seller refuse to do it? I suppose the seller could not tell us about which days he was exempting it from, but we hope that they don't do that, because if you vote for this, there's no obligation to pay the sales tax.
Yeah, but how are we going to know that they collect injuries and bring it to us? How do we know what not to accept?
So I'm trying to think of what example are you trying to push here? Is that someone goes into one of the stores in town and it says on Friday and says, goes to pay for their item, and the seller says, I want sales tax on there, and the purchaser says, I don't have to pay sales tax? Are they getting an argument?
No, I think the idea is that an online seller would say it's not worth the hassle to reprogram our computers. We're just not worry about it.
Amazon is still going to charge the sales tax and then remit it to the city. but the consumer then says, but I wasn't supposed to be charged because my city says that I shouldn't be charged today.
I
So
actually think
the onus would go back on the seller of the business, not, the onus would come back on us.
I think there is ways that you can seek refunds as a purchaser under the commission's code, right? Isn't that the case?
And Melissa has something here.
Okay.
Come on up.
So people can certainly submit, to have Amazon do a refund, but we do have a section in code, since I live in this code on a daily basis. There's a section in code where if a seller erroneously collects sales tax and they are not able to get that sales tax, refunded to their customer for some reason, then it is their obligation to remit that sales tax. So I think this would fall under that circumstance where, if Amazon incorrectly collects sales tax for those 2 days, and whatever they don't refund, they do have to remit. They don't get to keep it.
And the request for the refund is on the buyer, the consumer. That's on their plate.
To the seller.
To the seller.
So is it possible to make this a local thing only? No. That's all right. It's easy. Went through that.
Any further deliberation? Sarah, roll call please.
Okay, on the motion to authorize November 25th and November 26th as sales tax-free days, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
The motion passes 4-0.
Okay, that brings us to persons to be heard. Anything for on or off tonight's agenda? Give it 3 minutes. Come on up and state your name.
Good evening, Richard Wein. Though we note with sadness the passing of John Tapsovich, former mayor, I had not known him, but I certainly knew of his firm and certainly knew of the son, Marco, who was also a mayor here in Sitka. But there are other things that pass which also cause sadness. I noted today in the Sitka Sentinel that Abby's Reflection is going to be closing, and I certainly, from my earliest memories of coming to Sitka, I remember Abby's Reflection, what a great window they had. Was in it a couple of times. I don't do quilting, but I had bought some fabric in there to make something. And so these are like true Sitka businesses, and when they leave, it is my sincere prayer that we get another true Sitka business in there. I don't want to buy Tanzanite rings, I'm sorry. And that because these types of things help shift the city away from, I'll just say Sitka. I also know of another piece of property that was bought through cruise line agents, which is a significant piece of property, which that business is going to go out, and it's going to be utilized for cruise. And the way I use this as the incremental movement towards seasonalization, as the cruise line money really begins to add up. And if you don't understand the power of cruise line money, look what happened in Juneau, where that 2.3 acres of harbor was sold for $20 million to like Norwegian Line, when the next closest bid was like 4.2 million, which was from the city. There's a lot of money, but where the money really comes in, Norwegian gave it away to Hunatoto. because the amount of money that are keep shifting, and we have to pay attention to this stuff. The other thing that I have to tell you before my time runs out is that there was a study that came out Monday. And you may think this is just past stuff, but it's not, because it's active in the city, is that COVID vaccines for young people are unethically justified. This is a study from Harvard, Hopkins, and like 7 other places, and the evidence just keeps going on, but this was an ethical study, and based on various scientific studies, they said young people should not be receiving it. Who's the young person? Anyone less than 30. And the evidence is becoming clear. Please do not do the mRNA. Thank you.
Any other persons to be heard? On to reports. Anyone have any reports from the deputy mayor positions? Administrator?
No, I think you heard my monotone voice enough tonight, so I'll pass.
Mr. Hanson?
No report.
Any liaison representatives? Parks and Rec met today. I have one more Parks and Rec meeting at the beginning of next month, but this last one, staff reports were all about how August and September big events went really well. Great kudos to the National Night Out. Mud Ball went really smoothly this year with no real issues that came up. There's been a lot of praise over the basketball court revitalization, I guess, the court painting. Lots of people love that, and there's actually a group that's looking at something similar, possibly for the Crescent Harbor tennis courts, which would be really exciting because it is quite a beautiful thing. The staff and PD have been talking a bunch, or will be talking a bunch about when the code enforcement officers brought in, just how that can be worked around with Parks and Rec and other departments. So some good stuff there. Movement on the DOT work on the next phase of the Seawalk, making sure that concerns and desires are met with that development. And the community recreation team is working forward. The coordinator position interviews are starting this Friday, so look forward to having a new position in there, and that person getting some of that great work done that needs to be done. That was envisioned through the creation of the new Parks and Rec community positions. Beyond that, Sitka Trail Works has been very excited about some of the trail work that's going on out at Salmon Lake Trail, and then also the Sea Lake Cove Trail work is going to begin here very soon. So nothing else from them, really. Dave?
I would just like to say it has nothing to do with my liaison job, but I went to the police department thing, a shindig that they had up at Motorfield, and it was awesome. There were, I don't know, numerous hundreds of people that showed up to it, I'm sure. They had the trooper cadets there helping out do things. There were various groups there that were doing things. It was totally an awesome event that I thought was one of the greatest things that we've done in the city in a long time. The next one was the Coast Guard Appreciation Day a few days ago. Another great thing, the ladies in the office helped put that on and did a lot of the work for it. And I think those things always go well with the community and the Coast Guard. When that helicopter lands out there, the place goes crazy. It's just a great thing. But those are two great events, and I think we need to do more of those in the community, whether it be for whatever we do. I think we should do those every couple months. I think that's just a neat thing.
Sarah?
Alrighty, so we have a number of vacancies on our boards, commissions, committees, Animal Hearing Board, Health Needs and Human Services, Library Commission, Parks and Rec, Port Harbors, Tree and Landscape Committee, and then our newly formed Sustainability Commission. So if folks are interested in serving on those, they can contact our office. I also want to remind folks the municipal election is Tuesday, October 4th. Eligible voters may choose to vote using any of these options: vote by mail, absentee voting in person. That begins on Monday, September 19th, and runs weekdays through October 3rd here at Harrigan Centennial Hall. It's in meeting rooms 2 and 3 at the front of the building there. Vote by mail, going back to that. Applications, if you wish to vote by mail, must be received by our office no later than September 27th. There's voting by fax, there's voting by personal representative, and then of course on election day itself, the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. here at Harrigan Centennial Hall. We have wheelchair accessible booths and an ADA compliant voting apparatus available during absentee voting and at each precinct on election day. So I encourage folks, if they have questions, they can contact our office or they can visit our election information page on the website. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Any other reports? Good there? Okay. No executive session tonight. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you for coming tonight, and we are adjourned.
Oh, you